Kelley, critical topic for emerging franchisors, growing franchisors. You saw it with your franchise system. Franchise brokers play a critical role in the sales process. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. And so as we have this conversation today, the goal is to create value and really understand for franchisors how to grow your franchise system. What could the working relationship be with franchisors? And one preface to everything, like lawyers, accountants, any professional, you're going to have some amazing brokers that hold amazing standards and some that don't, right? So, there's always that mix. But the question and the issue is really for franchisors. And so, Kelley, if I could start off the conversation with a couple of things. There's one brand in particular that I'm thinking about, and in a home service category. And years ago when we spoke, we talked about a number of things. FDD itself, which was probably not up to best standards, best practices, not only legally, but in that category, structure, service territories, things like that. And so at the time, we revised the FDD, and we also had a conversation, which was like, hey, your ideal fit franchise buyers, they operate in a space where franchise brokers have significant influence and value, home service category. And at that time, I recommended to the client, I would join a couple of broker groups, start speaking to brokers, and like any profession, you have super qualified and genuine, and every once in a while, not so. They joined broker group. They started working with brokers, and I'm convinced it's been a net positive improvement for their franchise system. And I'd say for a couple of reasons. One, they built relationships with some really genuine brokers. Two, they've been onboarding good franchisees. They've grown their footprint, and the cost benefit analysis, I think, overwhelmingly favors that they worked with brokers. So home run. Another brand we spoke with, very similar, had a similar experience, but they came back from a conference or they had conversations and they said, hey, I was told by a broker that I should be increasing my initial franchise fees. And that they're showing another brand, but if I increase my fees, they'll show mine. And should we do this? And that's where I thought there was some bad advice, right? Because how do you frame this, Kelley, in terms of this conversation or what I'm saying here? I mean, that's where my advice there too was, hey, look, and we compared to the brand that was selling, and I won't go into too much detail. They were a younger brand. They didn't have as dynamic of a management team, less proven. They were selling on unit economics that may be accurate, but I didn't think realistic. And some of my concerns, Kelley, was raising the initial franchise fee is going to raise franchisee expectations to a certain level that we may not be able to achieve, that the higher franchise fees may deplete franchisee capital for initial marketing, and that the franchisor short-term may be gaining more franchisees, long-term may not have the right fit and the right validation and success. So where do we go with this?
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And what I think, I'm going to say danger, that might be too strong of a word, but where the danger comes with brands working with brokers too early is if they don't fully understand their brand themselves, they don't understand the market they exist in, they haven't set up the right systems. Because it's so easy as an emerging brand or a new brand that maybe you're not even emerging, but you've just really been struggling with sales 3 to 4 years, to have someone come in and look at your brand and a salesperson, in essence, not all brokers are just sales. A lot of them are educators too, but coming in and, telling you, here are all the changes to make to sell your brand. And, at face value, that can seem like the solution, right? Like, oh my gosh, this person said all I have to do is raise this fee. All I have to do is adjust this number in the FDD, lower my royalty, increase my mark, whatever that looks like. But if you're just making those changes without understanding your actual brand and understanding the market and understanding the compliance of that, I think it's quite easy that you lose control of your brand and you start drifting away from what your core mission was, or you start drifting away from what your initial expectations were, because someone else is telling you, here's what's wrong with it, here's how to sell it, without you fully understanding the ramifications or being confident enough to say, no, that's not my brand. That's not what we're doing.
So if we broke it down in segments, right? Let's deal with the you need to increase your franchise fees, right? I think for certain categories of brands, brokers can be the ideal franchise sales channel. And many of them, and many are like just genuine people, and they're going to fit their candidates with what they believe to be the best brand, right? So I think from a cost benefit analysis, the benefit for the franchisor, whatever the percentage of the fee they're giving up, I think is very valuable. Where I do get concerned is where FSOs and sometimes broker organizations just have this upward pressure to always say you should be increasing franchise fees. And while I think there's value, my concern is now it's changing the dynamic of what the franchise buyer is expecting, what they believe. I feel like the higher the franchise fee, more pressure on item 19 expectations, more pressure on income replacement or income replacement in an earlier period. How do you balance that as a franchisor? Because if someone says, hey, increase your fees, you'll sell more franchises, I mean, that sounds like a natural fit. The issue becomes, what does your franchise system look like 3 years from now?
And I think that's a big part of it, Charles, is your point about support and who am I putting myself up against when I raise my fees? Sure, my largest competitor might have a fee that's $20,000 higher than me, but if they've been in business longer, they probably have more complex systems, more sophisticated marketing strategies, and these other expectations that, we're still working toward, when we're in that emerging space. And, for some brands, honestly, they come in and they have lower franchise fees for a reason. They're wanting to come in and they're wanting to give people in a certain bracket opportunity. We were just talking to someone the other day. It was like, I will not have higher fees. I want to give opportunity to people that can enter at this place. And that's a core part of their mission. That's a core part of what makes their brand unique. And so I think there can be a little bit of identity loss when you just start having other people driving all of those decisions for you.
Well, and then I guess that answers the question, right? It's not a broker problem. It's you as the franchisor. Like, brokers are out there, they're looking to connect brands and candidates. You as the franchisor need to have your identity and understand what you're focused on, right? And so initial franchise fee, okay, it's the entrance fee to becoming a franchisee. There's also some expectations behind it, right? How do brands compare? But then it's up to you as franchisor. Does the higher franchise fee, like, you could have a successful franchisee, but if their expectations were higher, they're going to be dissatisfied. And in this case, my advice to the client was, even if brokers don't show your brand because of the fee, hold tight on what you believe your ideal franchisee candidate is.
Yeah. And
while this was mentioned to you by one broker or a couple, there's other brokers that are going to connect you because they think you're the better fit. And in this case, the other brand didn't have more experience. It was just they're working with a sales organization that was trying to push connections. And so, again, I think if you're a franchisor, it's not up to the broker, it's up to you. Think long term, think of what your validation looks like 3 years from now, and think about, the higher fee may work, but you need to ensure the expectations align. What got me ultimately was the conversation revolved around just raise the fees versus, well, you're delivering X value and your item 19 is demonstrating X, or you believe franchisee could achieve it, so you merit that higher entrance fee. I don't think that was part of the conversation. That was just one caveat. And by the way, everyone who's joined us, appreciate it. There's questions, disagreement, definitely throw in some comments. Love to have that conversation. that was my initial thought. And then for this client, for the franchisors looking out there, just think of it this way: brokers are business people like you. They're spending money on growing their business, qualifying leads. To Kelley's point earlier, they want to work with franchisors that have good processes in place. And so it's up to you to make sure you have those processes in place. It's up to you to make sure you have a good broker will have more respect for you for saying no, that a certain candidate is not a good fit or has the wrong expectations, than just accepting new franchisees. But what's striking for me, though, Kelley, is when I diagnosed the situation and the competition was focused with a group that's going to focus on high sales. I'm like, they may sell, but they may burn out 3 years from now because the expectations are not going to align and the system's not going to do that well. Jamie, and I appreciate this comment. Franchise broker consultant, 100% show more based on fit than commission. And by the way, it's coming from from someone that I respect in the industry and I know is a great broker and consultant. So I appreciate the comment. But so for the franchisors too, Kelley, in this case, I thought it was interesting because they're still going to work with brokers. The brokers are still, good brokers are going to still refer to them. But for franchisors, I thought this was another opportunity. I said, look, in a world of AI, whether we're fans or not, and I'm not a big fan, just understand when a broker recommends a competing brand, the candidate's probably going to go to ChatGPT or an AI system, and they're going to come ask about it. And you need to build your narrative, a genuine narrative, on your website, answering the same questions. And chances are AI is going to recommend your brand as a comparison or as a potential alternative. I'll share with you, and we talked about this, Kelley. We had seen a brand on LinkedIn, and we were following them for a little while. And they had joined all the broker groups. They had joined with a sales organization. It looks like they'd spent a good amount of money on their franchise sales, and they were super emerging. I think brand new franchisor, not selling any franchises yet. And it looks like over the year and a half, they went to every conference, every event. You could track it all on LinkedIn. And then we'd seen some frustration by that founder who was upset a year and a half later, saying, I invested all this money, I haven't sold a franchise. And when I had seen comments along the way for that person, and when they were looking for advice, organic franchise leads, broker, I saw comments like, you could do both, broker and organic. I saw comments, don't ever reduce your initial franchise fee. Like, it was almost a mantra. And that comment had come from a franchise broker organization. The other one, a sales organization. Like the mantra, don't reduce the fee, which I agree. You don't want to have an undervalued initial franchise fee. But I think the emphasis in this case was the franchise fee was irrelevant. They weren't going to sell a franchise if they lowered the fee, and they weren't going to sell a franchise if they raised it. In this case, to validate toward brokers, they never sold one of the franchises, even though they were at the higher end of the fee. And I feel like that validates the point, which is, a higher fee is important, but in this case, the brand really didn't clarify what it was offering. It was selling the product and or service, I won't get into it, not the franchise opportunity. It wasn't focused on, it was focused on its product service, not what we offer franchisees, where we're a good fit, what's the opportunity profile. So of course they never sold a franchise. But they were in the broker groups. They went to all the conferences. They went to the meetups. Other than saying, don't reduce your fee, why didn't someone tell them, hey, pause? What are you really offering in your franchise? Certainly no broker placed anything with them. So good for the brokers. But why did someone at an organization they're joining, why didn't they tell them to pause?
I mean, I think that's the problem, right? And if a franchisor doesn't understand their brand identity, how are you going to expect someone else to? And so, um, to your point, there might need to be some more, maybe there should be different criteria for whether, you get accepted into broker groups. Again, like they're not all created equal. I'm sure some have some really, actually, I know some have some really great criteria because I didn't get included in a few in the beginning until I made some changes operationally, actually. Actually, I did like interview with a few groups. And I think that was a really great process. But I do think it's a two-way street that a lot of people ignore. And when we're talking about this individual, it's probably similar. And I have this conversation with franchisors all the time that are struggling with broker groups. I'm like, how well does the group know you? Are you, sending monthly emails out, giving updates on your brand? Are you including brokers in virtual discovery days? Are you really giving them the opportunity to understand your brand, your values, and who your ideal franchisee is? If you're not, how responsible can they be for some of the leads that come through if you're not engaging in that process as well and educating around what you're looking for? And that's, it's work for the franchisor, but ultimately it does lead, I can say from experience, to getting better qualified leads, working with a handful of brokers that really understand our mission and who we're looking for. So I think, it's a two-way street, and we're not always looking at it that way. We're just thinking like, send us these leads without providing, the criteria around those leads.
I think that's the best advice, Kelley, because that's right. When they get to I need to raise my franchise fee, they're skipping over the hard work and the dedication, which is, to your point, find those handful of brokers, but it's your job to educate and inform them about what's a good fit.
Absolutely.
And, thinking of that, Kelley, I know a bunch of brokers that would say, okay, I would get a higher commission with brand X, but based on what you've described, I know they're going to be better fit with you, but they're not doing that. So Kelley, what do you recommend? So in this case, franchisor goes to a broker conference, sees a FSO, like trying, selling away and really pushing a brand. I happen to think both with brokers and organic, that challenge becomes an opportunity if they adopt your strategy, which is to really drill down on those conversations and that fit. So for brands that are out there right now, Kelley, what would you recommend? How do they inventory? How do they know if they're really communicating what they're looking for and the value they deliver versus how do they get to that special level with brokers and the public?
I think, communicating is important, obviously. Like I said, we would do monthly email updates to all the brokers we worked with. We did virtual discovery days quarterly when we'd invite the brokers to come in, see our operations, meet the team. We have a number of brokers we'd invite to come out and actually come to a physical discovery day. And we paid to have them come out and go through that experience so they could experience the brand and know who we were looking for, know who the right candidates were to have in the room. And was it work? Absolutely, it was work. But the quality of those leads went way up. And I think, and honestly, we actually got some really good feedback from brokers from that experience as well on things we could adjust that weren't just fees, right? And then they were able to talk to these candidates like, oh, I've experienced the brand. I know about the brand. I've met, the CEO. Like, I think putting work into those relationships is really, really important. Just as important as pressure testing your brand, though, whether you're even ready for it. And that's where a lot of people, like, we need sales, so we're going to go to this FSO who's going to bring in 40 a year. Can your brand handle 40 a year? Probably not.
Oh, yeah.
So I like to use the analogy when I talk to franchisors. If you had a popsicle stand and you were selling out to everyone in the neighborhood, would your next step be open up to the next neighborhood, or would it be to become a distributor for Wawa? You're not ready to become a distributor for Wawa just because you're doing well in your block, right? Your system isn't set up for that. And so, I think there's a shared responsibility on franchisors and brokers to kind of pressure test the system and make sure that system is even ready for the number of leads this broker is promising to bring in.
I think the pressure test is a great point. I mean, we're legal counsel, so we don't get involved in sales. Um, and clients really don't listen to us about sales. We don't do that. But when I see these young brands and they only have their company owned outlets, or I see brands and not our clients, but they only have company owned outlets and they're selling through an FSO at a quick pace. I mean, we have no control over it, but our advice is don't do it, right? Wait till you have a validation base of franchisees before you turn that lever up. So I guess ultimately the analysis is coming down to, it's not so much about the brokers giving the wrong advice, is you may be skipping over steps and getting the diagnosis wrong, right? You're focused on the symptoms and not the underlying issue. In this case, the symptom of brokers not selling your brand, well, the solution is not going to be raise those fees. It's going to be doing that work that Kelley was sharing. And I'll share some comments here. Gary, I think the franchise fee is not a number you pull out of the air. Really should be based on the ROI of the franchise brand. I think this is a great point. And legally, what I would say is I wouldn't base it on the ROI, but I agree with the sentiment here, right? In the sense that, Gary, my belief is economically brands, what's the economic profile? Lifestyle franchise, supplemental income replacement, legacy building. And what concerns me is if you take these service-based franchises that are going to start off as supplemental income or become income replacement, but you keep stacking on franchise fees, no matter what, that people are going to get the expectation that they're going to build a legacy or replace their income right away. And I definitely get concerned about the mismatch on the expectations. So I think can't show ROI because of legal purposes, but I think the sentiment is there. But likewise, too, I mean, you could have a great supplemental income business. At a certain level, franchise fee reflects what's my cost on training and onboarding and system stability and sales, right? Which is legitimate. So I think that's great. Kelley, this is for you, which I think is a great question. How would you go about scheduling discovery days, invite individual brokers?
Yeah, so that's great. So, I mean, we would, like I said, send out monthly newsletters. There are certain brokers that would engage regularly with us. That's a no-brainer. But specifically, if we had brokers who were doing a lot of territory checks, or if we had a broker who had a lead that was a great lead, came all the way through, and their applicant is getting ready to come to discovery day in 2 months, we'd invite the broker to come too. And it's actually really, I loved those discovery days because the broker gets to experience the brand if they haven't already. And they're sitting side by side with this person that they took through the journey. And it's very validating for both that the broker did a great job and that applicant's a good fit. And they really get to kind of see that in action. So, that for in-person, those were great. We would do virtual discovery days too. And we'd invite everyone in the networks. And it would just be 3 or 4 hours of our executive team, meet the team, ask us questions. It was, kind of like sitting in the hot seat. We'd open up to Q&A and we would answer all the questions. Anything that, brokers wanted to know or didn't understand about the brand, we were there to answer those. And we would get pretty good attendance for those, and definitely got better qualified leads after that and created some really deep relationships with some of our brokers.
And then Christine's follow-up, right? They just created their CRM, introduced it to Discovery Day. What stands out to me, Kelley, is to your advice and for Christine, one thing I would challenge is before you even get to the CRM, do an audit of your website, right? Is it answering the questions that the candidates are going to have? Is it answering the questions that the broker is going to have? Not fluffy responses, but a genuine deeper dive. What your brand stands for, who you're a good fit for, the opportunity you offer, all the things that are going to be important. And what I would say is so many franchisors have that generic website. And in this case, it's even more important for AI and other reasons. Any advice there, Kelley, before, like, what's a good checklist before they start hitting brokers with the CRM? And because a lot of it could get ignored.
Yeah, I think inviting people to a brand deep dive, like come learn about our brand, really good place to start. And just hosting something live, like we're doing right now, just hosting something. But to this specific question, Christine, this is a beautiful example of what could go out in a monthly blast to all of your brokers. Really exciting update here. Just released this new CRM. Here's what you should be telling applicants about it. Because they don't know. And this is a beautiful point, Christine. You've done something great with the brand. How would the broker know? If you don't tell them, all they know is the original packet you provided, and that's what they will continue to sell without updates, without exciting operation changes, without grand opening announcements. The only way they know that's happening is if you're telling them. And so I think this is a great way to continue to highlight your brand and stay top of mind, because sure, there might be different fee schedules, but there's also something significant about just staying top of mind as well.
I think we're uncovering, Kelley, that if the advice is raise the fees, it may be masking a bigger issue, and you need more work to do. And I mean, despite the title, it's not so much the broker's wrong advice, it's you're not doing your groundwork here. Jeff's comment, why broker versus building an internal sales team? What's your thought there, Kelley?
Well, I can tell you, for me personally, it was the ability to do so. As a new franchisor, you're so wrapped up in operations, franchisee support. Like, I just could not even imagine building out an internal sales team at that time. But I think for a lot of people, it really is, it's that ability to have that employee without having that employee in the beginning. So, and just the sheer numbers. You look at some of these organizations, they might have 500 plus brokers that are able to have conversations about your brand versus one internal, sales.
Yeah, and I also think it's I think the answer, if we reflect on how we see our clients growing, ultimately it may be an all of the above approach, internal team and brokers. What the question also may be confusing certain items, which is many times the brokers are your lead generation source, right? So they're bringing you the lead versus, and very good brokers will say it's not their job to sell your franchise. Their job is to make introductions. I think that's a very fair statement. So the reality is a good broker is going to expect you to have some internal function and person that they could hand off the lead to. So you're going to need both, right? But also understand brokers are out there working to generate leads and all this other stuff. So, that plays an important role. And then this is I think this is great advice here. Broker perspective, physical discovery days are much more powerful than virtual ones. Invest in good brokers, invite them to do content in your headquarters. Wow, that's great advice, actually. Invite brokers that live close by headquarters. That's not a high cost for attendance. I mean, phenomenal advice there for the franchisors. Which gets to, the noise. I guess brokers, franchisors, we all do. We get hit with the LinkedIn noise and other noise where, I just saw the comments over and over. Don't reduce your fee. I get it. But that's not really the story we're dealing with, right? The story is, hey, if someone's telling you to increase your fees, they may be right, or they may be giving you very shallow advice. Do a deeper dive audit. Do your fees align with expectations? But also, for the good brokers out there, and there's many of them, it's not the higher fee that's going to get their attention. I mean, it will, but I think for most of them, if you're a better brand and you're communicating it better and you're building those connections, they're going to feel more comfortable connecting your candidates to you. So there's a mix here. There could be some bad advice, I think, generally. And then also for the brands that are out there, and I see it again, I saw it on LinkedIn again. There's a brand that came to FranCamp, which, by the way, guys, if you're on this live stream or watching it, if you haven't been to a FranCamp event, definitely consider it. Last one, it's all playbook focused. the Fran Camp events. The next one is in Chicago in December. Here's the key. This is not
In Miami,
hypotheticals.
Charles. It's Miami.
Oh, Miami. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's in Miami. No hypotheticals. We're going to have great speakers, 2 case studies with winning brands. And the goal is, as part of the playbook, really unlocking what creates that unicorn status, what gets your brand to the next level. So definitely feel free to reach out to Kelley if you want to learn more about it, or Fran Camp. But the reality is there's opportunity right now. I think there's a shift, right? Franchise brokers will remain important. You have these franchise sales organizations and groups, but now AI is an important validation source. So as you're thinking about your conversation with brokers, really consider what your website is communicating, those differentiators. If your differentiator is a higher franchise fee, I think you're going to lose the battle there.
Agreed.
Any last thoughts, Kelley?
I mean, I guess my last thought is just remembering that, working with brokers, working with whoever it is, it's a two-way street, and it's about relationship building. People are going to brokers because they still want to talk to a human. They don't just want to go on AI and get a suggestion. They're probably doing that too, but they still value connectivity. And so I think as a franchisor, it's really important that we're acknowledging that as well. And that, we're connecting with those brokers and making sure we know who we are and who's right for our brand, and that they know that as well.
Kelley, that last point, because you live that, and we met a number of years ago, and I remember one of our first conversations where you had paused your franchise sales, but you're talking about remembering who you are. Like, I think that's where the magic is for the brands, and I think even for brokers building their business, how do you give yourself that gut check, right? That, hey, I'm not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to just joining a different group or hiring a different marketing company or raising my fees. Where do you get that gut check moment? Like, where should brands be focused to make sure they're staying true to who they are or should be?
For me, it always came down to franchisee support. If something was going to bring me closer to being able to provide support, it was good. If it was going to take me farther away, it was bad. And so a lot of the conversations I would have with brokers when interviewing them was, what if you bring me a candidate and I say no? What if you bring me a candidate, you spend 6 months with them and then I say no, right? And if the response was, well, the expectation is we're going to have this many sales a year, versus, well, it's your brand. Of course you have the ultimate say, right? And that massive growth, would adding 100 franchisees help me provide support or take away support? If the answer is take away support, it was an easy decision, right? That's where I had that pause and needed to rebuild some systems and turn it back on. And I was working with phenomenal brokers because we went through that were like, I get it, pause. And that all brokers aren't created equal. That wouldn't be the case. Some would not be okay with, we're going to turn it off for 6 months. We're going to turn it off for a year. So, I think, that gut check of, am I getting closer or farther away from what I set out to build?
Kelley, when you think backward or you recast, how do you describe the benefit of the moments where you said no? Like, what was that gut check moment? What was the reason why, for your principles and being true to what your brand was, that you said no, and what was the benefit of that?
I think I can tell you a few examples. When we would have someone come in and right out of the gate, a potential franchisee was trying to tell us all of the ideas they had to make our system better. That was usually a gut check of, that's great. We haven't even entered a relationship yet. We have this whole system of amazing franchisees that are following the system and doing well. We don't need someone coming in with a negative attitude about the system. But even more so, a handful of times that I gave a hard no is when values didn't align. And that's really hard to tell until discovery day in some cases. So there's some cases, brokers would bring me leads and we'd get all the way through discovery day, approval day, and there's that expectation we're going to sign, and we didn't sign. And, the biggest reason is we made a promise to our franchisees that this is who we are. This is our identity. This is our moral standing. This is who, so to let anyone in would be breaking a promise to all of the people who are already there. And so that made it easier. But I think, really having that conviction and your brand and what you stand for is important. And it takes time. It takes practice. It takes making a few mistakes to know who is wrong for your system. But once you do know, again, working with the right brokers is so important because they'll respect that decision and, ultimately, keep bringing the better and better people to you.
It strikes me that it always comes back to the focus on how you're going to better support the franchisees. And ironically, as you do that, you're distinguishing your brand, right?
Right.
And some of the examples I mentioned, I don't think they were focused on it. Not because they're bad people, or no one sat there and said, hey, you need to get this aligned. Kelley, I think that's great advice. Guys, I appreciate everyone on this live stream. And again, if we see you at Frank Camp, that would be completely amazing. Looking forward to the next live stream. If you have any topics you'd like to discuss or something you want to share, reach out to us. Reach out to Kelley on our team too if you have any follow-up questions. And I hope everyone has an amazing day. Kelley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Charles.
Take care, guys.